welcome. Please join
Thank
us in our lovely wooden studio. So we've been talking about the specifics of different technologies, but let's talk about the mindset to navigate this rapid pace. What kind of mindset and skills do you think the CEOs and leaders of the futures need?
Well, there is an incredible change happening, right? So the AI is moving at the speed that we have not perhaps seen before. It is just an extraordinary speed. So the mindset, then you have to think about, what does that mean for a CEO? What does it mean for all of us, really, in our own job? So that one mindset has to be, I need to move faster. Right? That's one thing. And why am I not moving faster? What are the processes, the bureaucracy that is hindering us, or resistance to change? So I think that's the first part. The second part is that we all have to have a growth mindset, which means that what I did before, it's not enough. I need to be able to learn and upskill myself. And so how do I do that? What is the openness to new things? Takes me out of my comfort zone. What have you been practicing in 10 years are you really good at? Now you need to sort of push yourself to new frontiers. I always think of that as a beginner's mindset. I'm starting off from scratch. I don't know what it is, but I can acquire it. So I think that's the second thing. And I think there's a third thing. You have to disrupt yourself. I'm going to talk about that later this afternoon. When it comes to AI, it's easy to say, I don't want AI to take my job. What you have to look at is to say, what are the tasks that my job consists of? And where can AI help me? And where can it substitute my thing? And that's a hard thing because, I'm really good at, say, interviewing candidates for a job. But if AI can do that almost as good, I don't feel comfortable, giving up something I'm good at. But eventually you have to. That's what I mean by disrupting yourself.
So if leaders are coming to terms with that and preparing for that, we know we're still probably going to need human leaders. But how do you prepare your team for that?
So that's why I think you have to sort of teach these things. We've got to move faster. We need to have a growth mindset. And you need to sort of start talking about what does it mean to disrupt yourself. If I'm a leader of the HR and I have a recruiting team, we know there's so many recruiting tools out there already that are really good and getting better every month. So how are we going to use them? And it's a very difficult leadership challenge because people are, and rightly so, are fearful that I am implementing AI tools in recruiting, for example, and then I'm afraid that the next quarter, you're just going to fire me because you don't need me anymore because I made myself obsolete. And so it's a very difficult leadership challenge to do. But I think you have to engage people in a dialogue as opposed to just imposing it on people.
Do you have any good examples that have happened over the past couple of years as we've seen AI tools become much more mainstream? Any companies that have done it well?
I think there are many companies that are doing some of it well. IBM in recruiting, for example, they have been using a lot of these tools. And I think they have done a really good job. I work at Apple, and at Apple, there's a difference in these tools between augmentation and automation. Augmentation means that I'm using it as a co-pilot. I'm helping me do a better job. Automation means the tool will do everything, and I'm not there anymore. And in augmentation, I think we have seen the best results so far. And for example, there's a tool out there called Textio. It helps you write better job specifications when you send them out. And so that is not biased, that is well written, and so on. It gives you that feedback. That's augmentation. Automation means that it writes this job spec for you. And that's where we see a lot of bad stuff. I think some of these tools are actually overused. I don't know if you have done video interviewing, meaning that you show up in a room and there is not another person on the other side. there is an algorithm on the other side, and it's doing you a video interviewing, and you're inputting your stuff, and then you know at the end of it, okay, I did an interview with a robot, basically, and then you think that there's going to be a human watching you afterwards to make a determination. No, there's often an algorithm that is scoring your interview and spitting you either out or getting you further. Those processes are often abused. They're not as good as it used to be. So I think one has to be very careful about overusing these.
Well, that's an interesting one because some of the people behind those technologies argue that they mitigate for things like unconscious bias and and gut feelings that can come from those processes. So there's different sides to this.
And many times they do, and sometimes they don't. They actually, there's a terrific book out there, if you're interested in this sort of part of it, is called The Algorithm. And it talks about particularly recruiting as an example, where the algorithm is trained on previous employees that, for example, can be mostly, say, men in this example and not women. So inadvertently, it's actually favoring men, even though we think it is supposed to be objective. So you have to be really careful. So I think one has to use these tools with caution, at least for the time being.
Yeah. Let's talk a bit more about some of the common threads of how the best leaders navigate through these kind of changes, figuring out which technology to use, figuring out how to get the right teams together. And you've written about this in your book, Great by Choice with Jim Collins, which came out a while ago. But what's relevant, do you think, still about the research and the key results from that?
Right. So Jim Collins and I wrote the book Great by Choice as a follow-on to Jim's earlier book called Good to Great, which a lot of people know. And in Good to Great, people were saying, okay, you tell us how companies go from good to great, but what about industries that are really turbulent, full of change, full of uncertainty, where you can get wiped out because there is a change coming and you don't see it? You don't really study that in Good to Great. So Jim and I said, okay, that's a great question. It's a great criticism. Let's go and study it. And so Great by Choice is a study of companies that did really great in a world full of change. And I think that's exactly the world we live in. So I think it's even more relevant today than before because it is easy to say, the world today is different. But there are actually industries that have lived this world for many years. Take software, semiconductor, airlines. These are really, really turbulent industries for the last 3 decades. So in that sense, I think it's still relevant.
So what metrics or KPIs can businesses and leaders use to measure their effectiveness when it comes to adopting and integrating these new technologies and feeling like they're guiding their teams on the right path?
Right. So great finding and Great by Choice was, okay, so you're in an industry where there is fast technology change. Things are happening fast. And so then the temptation as a leader is to say, we need to move as fast as the changes in the industry. And that turns out to be dead wrong. Because a mistake you can make is that you're just trying to catch up with every change there is. And what happens is that you have no consistency. You're just blowing with the wind. This year the market is moving in this direction and we follow that. The next year is moving in this direction, we follow that. What you need as a leader is to have a deeper understanding of the long-term trends and not just going to the short-term fads. And I think AI technology is a little bit of a short-term fad. And so let's just adopt all the tools because that's what everyone else is doing today. And you risk doing something wrong. So we mentioned these recruiting tools. Let's adopt all of them. And it turns out that you now have a worse recruiting process than you had before. And so that's what I mean, you be cautious about sort of the long-term strategy.
So briefly, what would you incorporate into a risk mitigation strategy?
So what we found in Good to Great, Great by Choice as an example is, you need to set a key markers that are important for your business, like 1, 2, 3, and then you need to stick to them and try to do them in good times and bad. Give an example. So one of the most successful airline in the US history is Southwest Airlines. Right now they have some problems, but for decades they've been incredible. They said to themselves, for us to dominate the US market, we are very small, we're going to open 4 new cities every year. 4. That was the marker. Good times, 4, not 20. Bad years, competition to do 0. How many do we do? 4. Right? That long-term consistency. You do 4 every year, and then you wake up one year and you have dominated the market. That's what I think you need. You need to figure out the KPI. That's been one example.
Okay. And very briefly, last question. We're going to be focusing a bit more on talent development with our next guests.
Yeah.
So what do you think is the biggest challenge when it comes to developing Gen Z leaders?
Gen Z specifically.
Yeah.
Some of my research suggests that the biggest challenge you have as a leader is they are asking for work where they feel passion, and they're asking for work where they feel a sense of purpose, meaning, contributions beyond themselves, contribution to something larger than they're saying profitability. So as a leader, to develop that talent, you need to find ways that they can work on things that gives them passion and purpose, and not sort of dreadful, trivial work, which is often required. So talent development means to find activities where they have both passion and purpose. And that's no easy task.
No.
But you also need to understand what they're passionate about and what they're purposeful. And that, I think, is the direction you need to go.
Great summary. Thank you very much for joining us here, Morten Hansen.
Well, thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you.